That's right, we're looking at subjective morality is logically impossible, which is an extremely interesting statement, and you might have some guesses about where this might be going, but your guess is most likely wrong. Now, I'm a person who thinks morality is subjective, and let me clarify a little bit what that means, as opposed to it being objective. If morality were objective, it would be true as a matter of fact that some particular action just is worthy of being condemned as terrible, or is worthy of being applauded, independent of what any agent thinks about it. It would be true not only that some action leads to some consequence, but that some agent ought to see that action negatively or positively, either because of its consequences or regardless of them. It would be a thing that's true about reality independent of anyone experiencing reality, in the same way that the physical nature of objects is true about reality independent of anyone's experience of them. In a universe of objective morality, every being in existence capable of having any moral opinion could morally approve of some action, and yet on some deeper level, unknown to and inaccessible to anyone, the actual fact of reality could be that the correct response to that action is to morally condemn it. And this to me makes no sense. I don't even understand what it would mean for something to be worthy of moral condemnation as a matter of fact, independent of any agent's experience. As I see it, morality is something very different from this. Morality is more of a social activity. It's a way of thinking and acting in relation to human action. It's humans reacting with condemnation or with approval to other humans' actions, or preemptively insisting that everyone should do this or nobody should do this. The world would be a better place if everyone was like this. The world being a better place meaning the world would be a place that I would prefer. And this preferred vision of the world that forms the basis for the moral response resides entirely within the subject who holds it. The unthinking, unfeeling external reality can't possess these preferences for you, even if you think it does. I think that's a good enough summary to start with, so let's see what the argument is.
There are two reasons why subjective morality is logically impossible. First of all, let's assume that morality really is subjective. So we can pick anything we want to be our highest good.
Okay, already we're off track because I don't think this is how people normally operate. We're into the kind of talk about morality that philosophers do. Philosophers who think morality has some kind of a clear framework, who think that there should be some sort of identifiable highest good, that it should be this considered, constructed sort of thing. I don't think that's how people work. That's how dorks like you and I maybe could work, who would sit down and write an essay before we decide what our position is on anything. But I think a much more typical experience of morality is people just get raised into a culture, and their culture gives them ideas like that's good and that's bad. Or maybe they have experiences and they don't like those experiences, or they do like those experiences, and then again, that's good, that's bad. They're not thinking of some summum bonum above everything else. They just react negatively when anyone does this one thing, and they react positively when anyone does that one thing. End of story. Is that a legitimate way to approach morality? Well, yeah, in the sense that if there is no objectively correct answer, it's not like the answers they reach are going to be objectively incorrect. Other people might have the experience that they don't like it, or they don't like some consequence of it. Okay, oh well, that's the entirety of human history. An endless tug-of-war battle of conflicting priorities with no particular end goal of any sort. Sometimes this even happens within an individual person.
We can pick anything we want to be our highest good. It could be eating cake, it could be, I don't know, going to the gym.
I'm guessing you'd choose the first over the second. No judgment, me too.
It could be doing charity work, or it could be killing somebody. Doesn't matter, because it's all subjective, right?
Well, doesn't matter how, in what sense? It'll matter to you, it'll matter to other people, but will it matter to something that's not a person? Will it matter to something that's bigger than any person? Would it matter to the sum total of all things if there were no people at all? Is the fact that it matters an objective fact even if there's nobody for it to matter to? Well, no, I don't think so. I think that's a contradiction. I think that the word to is not just there for decoration, it's necessary. Something only matters in relation to someone who it matters to. Now, people who believe in God will tend to recognize this, that something can't matter to something that can't care, which throws a huge wrench into the idea of objective morality, and so they say stuff matters to God, the moral lawgiver, and then say it's objective. But that's just proposing a different subject. It doesn't really address the problem.
So we can just pick whatever we want. So what happens now?
I don't know, we sit down with a quill pen and a candle, and we write 700 pages trying to turn the messiness of life into some coherent system with no trolley problems. We, the subject, desperately try to generate some moral system that we can pretend is objectively true.
Let's say that my highest good is eating cakes.
I knew it. I'm with you, buddy. In my moral system, going to the gym is evil, unacceptable. Exile for those people, bare minimum.
So I will sacrifice everything for that one goal.
To eat cake? Okay, I'll sacrifice like $7 for that. Sorry, I'm just not on your level.
By everything, I mean everything. That's what it means to have a highest good.
Okay, so your moral system has to be built on something that you would sacrifice absolutely everything for. So if I, for example, feel a bit of anger when I see my neighbor's house get broken into, that has to be fundamentally based on some singular highest good that I have clearly identified, for which I would give up literally everything. That doesn't sound true. I think I can just be mad. Why do I have to approach it in this weird way? Is this also some objective fact about reality that I'm not aware of? It doesn't really sound like you're talking about morality as such, like this natural way of reacting to human action. It sounds more like you're talking about some sort of obsession with one single arbitrary thing, and it doesn't even sound like it's about other people or any sort of social interaction at all. It sounds like you're talking about the obsessive pursuit of one goal for yourself. I think we're really off base as to how real people in the real world really think and feel in moral terms.
Right? That means I'll sacrifice my money, my time, my family, my friends, everything that is possible for eating cakes, if such an occasion arises.
Okay, again, I don't think this is a very realistic view of the human condition. I don't think this is really how morality actually is generally in practice. I don't think most people are anything like this single-minded. You do get people saying stuff that sounds similar from time to time. You know, my morality is based on the goal of maximizing human well-being. Is that person going to sacrifice literally everything to try to actualize that goal? Probably not. Most of them probably would just tweet about it while they're playing video games.
Okay, so why is that bad? What's the problem here?
Well, why is that bad is kind of a loaded question in this context. It's not objectively bad in a moral sense. What's the problem here, though? That's a different question. I mean, this is going to cause problems for you if you live like this. If you pick one thing to define as the highest good in all the universe and declare that regardless of anything, regardless of any context or any circumstance, you will tear down and destroy absolutely everything else to pursue it, I'd say it's pretty much inevitable that regardless of what you pick as the highest good, this attitude alone is going to cause you a lot of issues. Even more so when you consider that if it's just you on a desert island wanting to eat cakes, it's not really a moral thing at all. Where it becomes a moral issue is where it involves multiple people, generally all people. And so this implies that you would be starting to demand that no one around you do anything that impedes your goal of eating as many cakes as possible, and that they're morally obligated to do everything they can to ensure that you eat as many cakes as possible. And then I guess if your family won't buy you more cakes, you destroy them. Reality itself doesn't care. It's not going to look badly upon you for your actions. And there's not some objective fact knitted into the cosmos that says that the only factually correct attitude anyone else can have towards this is condemnation. So the fact that you're acting like this is not some objective evil. It's just that very likely you are going to suffer. Enjoy.
If you decide that eating cakes is your highest priority, and you spend everything for it, and that is your number one goal in life, you will very quickly get diabetes and die.
I think that's going to be the least of your worries. But yes, actions have consequences, I agree. I don't really see, though, how this relates to whether people make subjective moral judgments, or whether objective reality somehow does.
That's what will happen. If that's all you eat, or even if it's not all you eat, if that's the main thing that you focus on, you will have health conditions, even if you don't die. Then you will definitely get some very strong health conditions, which will prevent you from doing what? From eating cake.
Okay, well, it sounds like if your goal is to eat the maximum amount of cake in one lifetime, then you better start early figuring out where the happy medium is, where you don't end your life so prematurely that you actually end up eating fewer cakes overall. But this sounds more like a strategic issue than a moral one. I really don't see the moral connection.
And what's your highest good? Eating cake. So, the highest good that you personally decided prevents you from attaining it.
Oh, I see. So you're saying it's self-defeating. Sure, it's self-defeating, assuming you approach it in a thoughtlessly brute force way, where you don't consider where the actual sweet spot is, no pun intended. But I guess you could avoid that by, instead of making your highest good eating cake, just making your highest good that you eat so much cake that you get hyperdiabetes and die. That you can do really easily. That's not self-defeating. Pretty much got a straight shot over to that goal as long as you don't die of a heart attack first.
It's self-contradictory.
No, it's self-defeating, but I get what you mean.
Your highest good becomes your number one enemy over time. And time is exactly the main issue here.
Look, I agree, of course, that if you have no balance whatsoever, if you become incredibly fixated on one random thing as the absolute and only center of all your moral thought, that can have consequences that you might not like, whether you foresee them or not. Okay, if you care about that, don't do that then. But that doesn't mean that this is a thing which, by its very nature, must be morally condemned by all thinking beings, as a matter of objective fact. It's not some universal truth that every thinking agent should look down on you for giving yourself a health problem by eating cake. But yes, it is a physical truth of reality that if you value eating cake too much and actually do it, there are physical consequences.
This is the main thing that people forget from morality when they talk about it. Of course, if we just talk about anything in the moment, then you can do anything because you don't have to care about the consequences. But if you take the consequences into account, then everything will boil down into these two principles. Either one, whatever you decide is the highest good will help you do it again in the future, or two, whatever you decide is the highest good will prevent you from doing it again in the future.
Okay, but again, I really don't think people's morality is based on, one thing that they as an individual want to do. It's a very strange way, in my opinion, to look at morality as a concept. It cuts out the entire social nature of it. What's morality really about? It's about judging people by their actions, and the intentions those actions reflect, or you think they reflect. It's about disliking something a person could do enough that you want everyone to cut it out, or liking something that somebody could do enough that you think that in the relevant situation, it would be ideal for everyone to do it, and that if they do or don't do these various things, it reflects on them in terms of character. You judge their personality, their mind, their intentions, I guess maybe is a good way to say it, as more or less preferred. That, I would say, is typically how people approach morality. It's about what people intentionally do and whether those intentions match what you think makes the person a good match for the society. Someone that you think you can live alongside in relative peace and harmony at the very least. So basically, it's just your set of hard lines with regard to how you think people should behave within your society. But then the example you bring up is purely about one individual and their weird personal attempt to achieve one particular thing, which, could be broadened out into an actual moral view. I said that before with how you could say that everyone has to facilitate you getting more cake. But it's just interesting how your example of a subjective moral position has no reference to the main thing that most people would consider morality to refer to.
So by your own definition, either it will be self-contradictory or not. You don't get to decide what is good or bad.
Yes, you do. And you did. Was it self-defeating? Did you decide it was a moral obligation to get into the Guinness Book of World Records as the person who ate the most cakes in one lifetime, and then fail because of illness? Yeah, sure. But you still decided. You were the one with the moral opinion. If not you, then who? Well, everyone else as well, sure. They'll all be coming to their own positions too. They're all subjects as well. But who else? What else? The fact that you got diabetes is about physics and chemistry and biology. It's not reality calling you a bad person. It's not reality demanding everyone else call you a bad person. Diabetes is not the universe's moral judgment upon you. So yes, the moral opinion was subjective only. And in this particular case, your moral outlook got you killed. You believed that everyone was morally obligated to bring you cake, and that you were morally obligated to eat the maximum possible amount of it, and you misjudged and stepped on your own stupid feet, which you couldn't even see by that point.
It is decided by the rules of the universe. That's how things work. It's not subjective in the slightest.
Yeah, physics is not subjective. Physical consequences are not subjective. Moral opinions are. The person in your example had the opinion. The subjective morality was there. And where's the objective morality? Where is it established within reality, as a matter of objective fact, that the only correct response any person can have to you when you get this disease from the cake is to see your actions as worthy of condemnation? Well, as far as I can tell, it's not. And your example is supposed to establish that subjective morality, as in the lack of such a state of things within reality, and morality being nothing more than opinion and preference, is logically impossible, but you haven't done that either. You didn't even address it. All you've said is that you can have opinions that hurt you if you act on them. Yeah, I know.
And if you don't believe me, just try it. Pick a random, completely random value, place it above all other values, make it your highest value, and see how it goes over time. Will it help you or will it destroy you? It will do one of those two things, which is why there is good and there is evil.
Okay, my understanding of your point is something like this. Morality cannot be subjective because some, but not all, subjectively preferred highest goods can have moral systems built upon them which lead to self-defeating outcomes. And the systems with outcomes that are not self-defeating are the objectively correct systems. In other words, some moral systems have physical consequences, which objectively are consistent with the system's intent, and others have physical consequences which are not, which is true, but the only judgment of this state of things comes from the people who recognize it. Mindless physics are not judging you. They don't care if your system is self-defeating. That again is a subjective concern. I don't want to follow a system that's self-defeating, okay? That's your feeling as the subject. If you decide a moral system is worse on that basis, that's a subjective position. You're not getting from the objective, this system is self-defeating, to an objective, this system ought to be rejected. How do you propose to leap that chasm from the is to the ought? Maybe you have some argument for why you can, but you haven't stated it. You've just left it unstated as if it's obvious. But it's anything but obvious.
Will it help you, or will it destroy you? It will do one of those two things, which is why there is good and there is evil.
Okay, preferring not to be destroyed is a subjective preference. How is it an objective fact akin to physical reality that being destroyed by your own actions is bad? That it's baked into reality that you are obligated to dislike it, at the risk of being factually wrong? Well, it isn't, or there's at least no indication that it is. If you got a problem with it, that's your problem. So your definition of evil, then, moral evil, is just anything you do that results even inadvertently in your own destruction. So for example, if you like to go rock climbing, and then you fall and you die, it was morally evil to go rock climbing, and that was reality itself morally condemning you for your evil actions. A kid runs into the street after a ball and gets hit by a drunk driver, and so that kid was objectively evil scum. Like, you're defining things as moral or immoral based solely on whether they cause you personal harm or not. These kind of absurdities are the obvious outcome of that kind of thinking. And then, of course, this applies to all sorts of things that most people would consider very, very good, like heroism, say, or charity, where if you do them too much, you take too many risks, you try too hard to help other people, you can end up injured or impoverished or dead. Are these evil actions? Fireman decides the highest good is rescuing people from buildings, dies in fire saving child. What a bastard. If he wasn't, then reality wouldn't have done that to him. Do you see why it makes very little sense to try to say that physical consequences are reality's backlash to your objective moral failings? These are not the same thing. They're not even connected. One doesn't imply the other in any way. At least not necessarily. It's a big thing to try to support. And I think that most of the time, even believers in objective morality would consider this to lead to total absurdity. But you say it so confidently and without trying to defend it at all, that it's as if you think once you point this out, it'll be accepted without objection, as if the connection is obvious. Sorry, no. Far from it.
In case you are wondering if there is a middle ground between an idea being self-promoting or self-defeating.
I wasn't. I have no further interest in this at all. It's fundamentally nonsense, so I don't really care about the details at this point.
There isn't.
Cool.
The reason why is basically entropy. If something is completely neutral, meaning that it doesn't help you or harm you in any way, then you're wasting your time, and entropy is getting to you, and you're not doing anything to counteract it.
Okay, so it's not useful to sit around doing nothing. If you do that, then something's gonna get worse a tiny little bit around you. And so in some small way, it's self-defeating to do nothing actively useful. Okay, sure, I sorta see your point. We're off morality entirely now, or is this supposed to be a moral issue? Well, I guess, yeah, anything that causes you any sort of problem is objectively immoral, apparently, because reality punishes you for it, or God does, or the universe does, or something. So I guess it is still the morality conversation, in this weird way that basically nobody on the entire planet would recognize as a morality discussion except for you.
So there is no such thing as middle ground. Everything, and I mean every single action, every single value, will either be self-promoting or self-defeating.
It's an interesting thought, I'll give you that much. I'm not sure if I'm entirely with you on that, but I'm not against it entirely either. I guess I don't have to make up my mind, because this has nothing to do with the topic of whether morality is subjective or objective. So moving on.
Now that is the first reason, but there is a second reason. It's similar to it.
Does it have to be?
But from a Different point of view.
Okay, at least that, I guess.
Think about it this way.
No. Whatever way you tell me to think about it, I'm thinking about it a different way, just to spite you.
The only reason why we can have an intellectual discussion about what is moral and what is not is because it's objective.
No, mainly it's because we defined a bunch of words and made a language, and then we can use that to talk about ideas that might not actually be true.
If it wasn't objective, then we wouldn't be able to have any kind of discussion about it whatsoever.
Yes, we would. You can have discussions about things that are not factually accurate. God damn it, guy. I don't remember what your name was. I forgot to look.
I mean, supposedly, if we had the same basic values, then we could argue whether our actions help to promote these values or not.
Yes, and that would be objective. So if you have the subjective value that it's best to eat as many cakes as possible, that makes you a more morally upstanding person. And then your strategy is the stupid strategy of just packing in as much cake as possible all the time, to the point that you die so much sooner that you actually eat fewer cakes overall than you would have otherwise. Then we can say that that was objectively not an effective way to achieve your goal and to fulfill your values or whatever. But that doesn't mean your wish to eat a whole bunch of cakes is objectively true or false or correct or incorrect in any meaningful sense. It's a subjective preference, and there's no indication that it's anything else or that it even makes sense for it to be.
But nevertheless, if somebody disagrees about the basic values of your moral system, there is no intelligent way of talking about it.
Well, you can talk about it. It's more that you can't really have an intellectual conversation and come to an agreement, or sometimes even a very clear understanding. That's why people talk past each other so horribly in politics or religion or just discussions of worldviews and morality in general. People disagree on what they consider to be important on a very basic level a lot of the time, and that really can't be easily addressed with rational arguments or any sort of appeal to the intellect, because it's not an intellectual position. Usually changes in those kind of basic values are going to be the product of long, slow experience. And because that's not happening in a single conversation, or even many, probably, people tend to just clash and clash and clash, and then each side decides the other side's totally evil, irredeemable, and then they segregate off into separate social media platforms or whatever. But nevertheless, they can talk about it. Like, it's possible to speak these thoughts in words.
So what happens? Let's say that person A wants to help people and person B wants to kill people. Their moral systems are incompatible with each other. It's just what they subjectively chose, right?
Well, that's oversimplifying how people actually work. They don't really just make a simple choice about what's important to them. They're not like, that's what I value now. But regardless, yeah, that stuff is subjective to them.
He chose that one, so what can happen?
Well, many things, I guess. These kind of conflicts are going on constantly, because we live in a world full of people operating on subjective morality like this, with no clear way to distinguish who, if anyone, has any access to objective morality, if there is such a thing. So what can happen is basically anything that ever does happen. There's a pretty large suite of options.
Well, if they can't talk, and they are in contradiction with each other, the only thing they can do is fight. It means war.
That's a big one, sure. It's not the only possible option, of course. We have all kinds of systems that are basically proxies for violence. You know, you fight it out at the ballot box rather than in the street. That kind of thing. There's all kinds of things about society that are set up essentially just to vent off some of that energy and resolve it without it coming to extremes. But I don't think you're being necessarily fully literal there or totally comprehensive. You're not trying to list off every possibility. I'm just mentioning it because, I don't know, I do that.
That's the only way to solve such a conflict. There is no other way.
Oh, no other way at all whatsoever. Okay. I might have been wrong, so maybe it was worth pointing out that there are in fact other ways. Humans are able to speak and do all kinds of weird symbolic stuff. We do have solutions to these kinds of interpersonal conflicts that don't involve fighting physically. Sometimes it comes to that, but a lot of the time it doesn't, at least for a long time.
But hold on a second.
Okay, holding on. I think that's 1 second.
Who wins that conflict?
I don't know. Who's fighting?
Every single philosophy or every single moral system that you come up with will either help you to build a nation that will win a war, or it will prevent you from building a good nation that will win a war.
A good nation that will win a war. So the definition of a good nation, meaning morally good, is a nation that's more capable of winning a war. So this is just full-on might makes right at this point. If you're the bigger, tougher country and you manage to win, you're morally in the right objectively. And this seems to be true with regard to any goal. A country that's more able to fulfill whatever its goals are, no matter what they are, is objectively morally correct. And the way we know this, by my understanding of what you're saying, is that you don't get to the point where you can fulfill any of your goals without acting in an objectively morally correct way, because acting in a way that fulfills any goal is objectively morally correct. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I mean, it is consistent with what you were saying before, about things are morally good if reality rewards you for them, and morally bad if reality punishes you for them. What kind of person are you? What kind of belief system is this? Well, Catholic, apparently. I don't know that that's exactly a typical Catholic belief.
It effectively becomes a kind of game. And as many gamers know, there usually is a best strategy, or at least a couple of them. And some are much better than others.
Yeah, better strategically. I don't know many people who would consider military strategy to be effectively the exact same thing as morality. Whoever figures out the best troop movements and usage of their tanks is the objectively better person on a moral level. That's a very interesting thought.
The only reason why it's possible to be better is because there is good and there is evil.
Billy comes home from school. Dad, I got beat up. You what? You disgust me, Billy. I had no idea you were so morally depraved. Get out of my house!
So no matter what we do, it is logically impossible to have a subjectively moral system.
In this second point, you weren't even talking about anything I would recognize as related to morality at all. I don't think most Catholics would think so either. It's just a very weird thing. I don't hear that a lot. I don't have a lot to say about it. I'm just sort of enjoying the novelty. The thing is, I don't even find it invalid. Like, if you actually think that people who are bad at what they're doing, not good at strategizing or planning or setting up a national system, whatever, if you think that that makes them bad people on a character level, morally bad, then that is a moral question to you. If that's how you see it, then it can be a moral issue from your perspective. It's just very interesting that it is. I mean, that's so rare. It goes so far beyond the types of human action that are commonly responded to in a moralistic way. And it doesn't really seem to involve intention, which usually would be central. If someone's just a bumbling fool, well-intentioned and sincere, but just too dumb to accomplish anything, that normally would not be seen as immoral, but in this case it appears to be. I guess in this case the moral condemnation is more towards the nation itself for putting bumbling fools in charge, but the nation is just an aggregate of people, and what if the people are just a bunch of bumbling fools? Or what if there are circumstances causing it to be that way that are outside of any particular person's control? It still just doesn't strike me as what would normally be seen as a moral issue, at least not with the kind of consistency you would need to be able to say nations that win wars are morally good and the other ones are bad. So it's a very oddball way of engaging in moral thought. But if you're doing it, you're doing it. I can't say you're not.
Because ultimately, it will always come down to some objective factors that will help your civilization or yourself survive and thrive, or die and disappear.
Okay, and if you don't make the right trade deals and infrastructure investments and staffing decisions and so on and so on and so on, that means you're being a bad person, and so reality or God or something hates you, morally condemns you, and destroys your nation. That word, morality.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
That's why morality is 100% objective and not subjective.
Good effort. It was one, kind of. That was weird. Anyway, subscribe. Bye.